Thank you all. Welcome to our talk. We're looking forward to telling you all about shipping Apache Lucene 10. Who are we? I'm Luca, he's Adrien. We both are Elasticsearch engineers and also Lucene committers. We've been working on Elasticsearch and Lucene for quite a while. And we both worked on the Lucene 10 release. As a matter of fact, Adrien was the person who called the shots initially and planted the seed about organizing the release. He volunteered as a release manager. And then as the date approached, he decided to go on holiday. And then I took over as a release manager from him. With that out of the way, what are you going to learn in this talk? We're going to cover some of the basics about what Lucene is, what makes it a pretty unique project, in our opinion. We'll cover some history about the different majors and the evolution of Lucene over the years. We'll also take a bit of a detour to cover some of the Elasticsearch integration with Lucene, using Lucene 10 release as a case study for that. Up until that, we will then be able to look at how Lucene 10 unfolded, seen from our eyes as release managers, what happened behind the scenes. And then we'll tell you right at the end how long it took our team to get Lucene 10 to production and ship it to our users. With that, I'll hand it over to Adrien.
Thanks, Luca. So the Apache Lucene project committee published Lucene 10.0 in October last year. That release we are extremely happy with. It significantly improved the CPU and I/O parallelism of Lucene. It introduces support for sparse indexing, which is yet another tool in the Lucene toolbox, which makes Lucene even more versatile than it was until now. But before we dig into how that release actually unfolded, let's take a step back and go back to the origins of Lucene. I'm pretty sure many of you know that Lucene is a search library written in Java. What you may be less familiar with is that Lucene was actually started a long time ago, in the last century, in 1999, by someone called Doug Cutting. It was published for the first time in April 2000 on SourceForge, which, if you're not familiar with SourceForge, can be seen as the ancestor from GitHub. Then it moved to Apache in 2001, got promoted in 2005. Other things that may be interesting to know about Lucene is that that's a project that's contributed to by many individuals and companies, and that includes individuals that have been contributing for more than 15 years. So Doug Cutting is no longer contributing, but we still have people who've been contributing since before 2010, including one person, or maybe two even, in this room. And some of the companies that are contributing to Lucene happen to be competitors, but they still agree on contributing to that common building block for search engines, that's Apache Lucene. Something else that you may not know is that you probably use Apache Lucene on a very regular basis because it's at the foundation of some quite popular search engines like Apache Solr, Elasticsearch, OpenSearch, some lesser-known search engines like Yelp and Artisearch. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. And also some public-facing search engines. Whenever you go to Amazon.com, to X, or to LinkedIn and you search, you're using Apache Lucene under the hood. So it's pretty popular by many metrics. OK, so now you have a bit more context about Lucene, but we are here to talk about major releases. Why does the Lucene do major releases? And if you're familiar with semantic versioning, you're probably aware that major versions are about releasing breaking changes. Nobody likes breaking changes, but breaking changes are often required to release major features at the same time. I can give you a good example of that, which is in 2008, when Lucene wanted to release dynamic pruning, which is the ability to compute the top hits of a query without evaluating all the matches. Right? That was a huge feature, like major speed up. You could get the top hits in 5 times less time than previously. That was huge. But the downside of that feature is because you're no longer evaluating all the hits, you don't know how many hits match in total. And the previous API in Lucene for computing the best hits would return you with total hit count in addition to the top hits. And so we could no longer return the total hit count because we wouldn't know it. So we had to break the API to release that major feature. And that's the sort of breaking changes that happen in major releases. Another kind of breaking changes that we do is upgrading the Lucene ecosystem. In the case of Lucene 10, we bumped the minimum required version of Java to Java 21. There's going to be a talk by Uwe Schindler in France Salon at noon, if you're interested in learning more what we are getting, but essentially we want to take advantage of the new features that get released by the JDK, and we can only do that easily enough if we bump the minimum required version. And that's a breaking change, because you can no longer run with older versions of the JDK. Something which is less common, because it's not covered by semantic versioning, is the fact that Lucene also couples major versions with backward compatibility. A Lucene major version can read and write indexes that have been created either by the current major version or the previous major version. What that means is that if you're currently running an application with Lucene 9, you can read and write indexes created by Lucene 8 or 9. As soon as you upgrade to Lucene 10, you can no longer read and write the Lucene 8 indexes. So that's something that you need to be careful about. And in case you're curious, the main reason why the Lucene project is doing this is because it wants to keep the amount of backward compatibility work that's required for older versions under control, right? And at first you may think, well, can't you do it for longer? But when you start realizing that Lucene is now a project that's more than 25 years old, you probably wouldn't want to have 25 years old of backward compatibility work to maintain all the time. So that's the reason for that decision. And I wanted to highlight that breaking changes usually come with major features. So I listed a few major features of the last Lucene major releases. All of them are huge features. Now that we talked about the why, let's talk about the how. How do you do a Lucene release? And you may be surprised, but there's no such thing as a Lucene release agenda. Nobody knows in advance when it's going to be the next major or even the next minor. That's something which is completely done on an ad hoc basis. If you want a release to happen, there's somebody who needs to suggest it, and then usually a discussion follows. So if you want it to happen, somebody needs to make a suggestion, then there's going to be a discussion. We are going to agree on like what's the target date, what should be the release blockers, and so forth. We need to find a release manager because somebody needs to do the work. The release process of Lucene is not hard, but there's still work to be done, so somebody needs to agree to do that. It's mostly coordination work, making sure everybody agrees on the target date, blockers, feature freeze, that kind of stuff. Then running the release process is probably something that looks very familiar to you if you've done release management in the past. I don't think there's anything unique about it. And something which I find very interesting about the Apache Software Foundation, Lucene is an Apache project, is that it has a very strong bias towards consensus when it comes to code changes. If a single person says no, then the code change does not happen. It has the opposite incentive on releases. If you want to get an Apache release out, you just need to have 3 PMC members to agree on doing a release, even if everyone else agrees, and the Lucene project has several tens of PMC members, I don't remember exactly how many, but you just need to get 3 of them to agree on doing a release, and then nobody else can prevent that from happening. So that's a very strong bias towards getting stuff out. And I think that's a very interesting feature of the Apache Software Foundation. Something that happens, however, is that sometimes somebody is going to suggest, maybe you should do a release now, but to the rest of the project, it feels like the amount of value we are getting from the release is not actually worth the effort of doing running the release process. And so that proposal is going to get lost over time. That's something that has happened a couple times. So there's no release agenda. So how often does Lucene get released in practice? And you can see from that slide that it's actually not very regular. In the early days, it was pretty irregular, then it became frequent, and slowly the releases are getting more paced out again. And that's something that can be explained. Up to 2012, the Lucene 4 release, Lucene had a stronger focus on backward compatibility, and that actually made innovation quite harder compared to how things are today. And Lucene 4.0 has probably been the most major version in Lucene history. A lot of Lucene has been rewritten. A lot of things that were hard-coded in the past suddenly became pluggable. Things like how documents get scored used to be hard-coded to the classic TF-IDF scoring model. Suddenly it became pluggable so that you could use BM25. Things like file formats used to be completely hard-coded, and suddenly they became pluggable as well, which unlocked a lot of innovation. And the reason why releases became much more frequent afterwards is because, like I was saying before, Lucene uses major versions for backward compatibility management as well. And so suddenly you had a lot more big features to release, and as well you had a lot more stuff that you need to maintain backward compatibility-wise, and having more frequent major releases help keep the backward compatibility burden under control. And I believe that as time passes, we are still innovating a lot on file format, for instance. You might have heard of like the beta binary quantization for vector search that was released, or the fact that Lucene now uses bitmaps to encode dense block of postings, which are both very recent changes that happened in the last year. But I think we are getting better at managing that backward compatibility layer, and the releases are spacing out again and give users can enjoy more backward compatibility from Lucene. So that's a slide that I like a lot because it's just like the previous slide, but in parallel you can see all the advancements that happened that are related to information retrieval in parallel with the Lucene releases. And something like WAND, look at the bottom left, which is almost something sorry, if you don't know what WAND is, that's the most popular algorithm for dynamic pruning. It's taken as a given nowadays, right, that a search engine needs to support something like WAND. But actually, it only came out in 2003, when Lucene was already started for several years. And WAND is just an example. Many innovations that might feel like they're granted nowadays were actually released long after Lucene was started, like the BlockMax indexes paper, HNSW paper, the BERT paper, the SPLATE paper. These are quote-unquote recent things, like from the Lucene perspective, given how long ago Lucene was started. And that's just about the academic side of things. There's also been things in terms of like trends, like cloud computing is a trend nowadays, but when Lucene was started, AWS EC2 was not even a thing yet. Hardware evolves as well. Like SSDs have existed for a long time, but they only became a commodity relatively recently. Around 2006, they became available on AWS EC2. So again, that's another change that Lucene had to adapt to. ChatGPT is pretty recent if you compare it with Lucene. And I think that the point it's trying to make is that Lucene is turning 25 this year, right? Since it was first published in April 2000. And keeping a project thriving for so long is not something that happens only because you're lucky. It requires you to be extremely intentional about staying relevant over the years, reinventing yourself. And that's something that I believe that the Apache Lucene project has done right. But it's not easy. So Luca and I have been trying to think, why did Lucene succeed in staying relevant over so many years? It's a hard question. If we had to guess, I think there are still a few things that come out as helping a lot. The Apache way, I was talking about the decision process for code changes which require consensus, or pushing releases out which only require 3 PMC votes. Like that framework provided by the Apache Software Foundation, and I believe that it helps as well. Community focus is also something that's tied to the Apache Software Foundation. You're probably familiar with the Apache mantra that is community over code. And I believe that's something that the Lucene project embraces a lot, right? As good as your code is, if you don't have a vibrant community of users, then your project is not going to be considered a successful project. Like many open source projects, Lucene has some benevolent dictators who are not people who wake up one day and think, oh, from today on, I'm going to be the benevolent dictator of Lucene, but people who've been working on Lucene for a very long time and earned so much trust over the years that now they're very trusted by the rest of the team to the point that they can make the hard decisions on behalf of the Lucene project. Lucene solves a hard problem. If you wanted to rebuild Lucene today, even if you manage to create a strong team of developers with experience in the search space, it would likely take you years. It doesn't mean that there's no competition. You might have, like, we have some Vespa friends at this conference. You might have heard of TonTV, which is another search library in Rust. But still, like, those alternative projects don't come out of the ground in days. It takes years to create them. And so you can't build Lucene replacement overnight. Lucene is built on timeless principles in the sense that we still haven't invented a better data structure than inverted indexes to do keyword search. right? That hasn't changed. You would be amazed at how much of the research that was conducted in the 70s is still relevant today. Like BM25, after a few years where vector search was all the rage, people are noticing again the value of BM25. BM25 came out in the 70s, and it's still highly relevant today. And it's just one example out of many. And finally, Lucene is lucky to have people who care about it, contributing to it, who try to take a step back and not focus on only day-to-day work, but also think of like what are the big changes that need to happen in Apache Lucene for Lucene to stay relevant in 1 year, in 5 years, in 20 years, right? And that's something that's required as well if you want your project to survive for so long. I said it before, like GitHub can be seen as the new SourceForge. That tends to be the way that things happen naturally, like projects get replaced by other projects that have a more relevant paradigm for the recent years. So really getting a project to age, like get 25 without being replaced is something that requires you to be very intentional. Now your turn, Luca.
Thank you. Okay, so with that out of the way about what Lucene is, let's look a bit at how Elasticsearch integrates with Lucene. I'll be speeding a little bit for the sake of time through some of these slides. Now, at Elastic, we have a bunch of Lucene committers, a bunch of Lucene contributors. They're working mostly as Elasticsearch engineers on separate area teams. Elasticsearch is quite a big team. We run some of the Lucene tests in our build infra. Most importantly, we have some nightly benchmarks that their results are publicly available. And despite them being Elasticsearch benchmarks, many times they provide signal to Lucene, meaning they identify from the perspective of Elasticsearch performance regressions and things that happen. With that, okay, this is not about preaching on Elasticsearch. That's not the purpose of this talk. The most important thing that I want to cover here, provided that you all know what Elasticsearch is, I'm sure, is how you can get Elasticsearch these days. You can download it. You can go on the cloud and start a cluster. But you can also start a project on serverless, which is a rather new thing. And that's fully managed, meaning you don't have nodes or shards. You just start a project and send data to it. That's not only a fully managed thing, but it comes also with a different architecture that I'm not going to cover in depth here. But it's just to show the evolution of Elasticsearch over the years, similarly to how Lucene evolved through the years. So there is now an object storage where data is offloaded. There is a separation between indexing and search, and all of that. But what's most relevant for this talk is one big thing that serverless brought to our team, which was we sat down and we decided that we want to deploy weekly from main. And that has some consequences to how you work. For example, if you look at Lucene, the main branch is not a stable branch. We don't release from main. We actually backport changes to the release branches. So it's a pretty big statement. What is the reason for that? We want to get our code in the hands of our users as quickly as possible. If we focus on Lucene, what are the consequences? We need to be careful with main. We can't depend on a snapshot, release of Lucene, and things like that. So that forced us to create a process around how do we keep up with Lucene. We created a feature branch cut off of main that depends on a snapshot of the next minor release of Lucene, where we do our work. And that means we can integrate Lucene changes ahead of time before the next minor is released. Also, we can work on our features that depend on new functionality that is not yet released, so we are ready. When Lucene gets out, it's just a matter of updating the dependency, taking that branch, merging it back to main, and then it gets shipped by the automation. You can imagine that this is quite a short feedback loop compared to traditional releases, where when is the next release train? It's going to take weeks to get that out to our users. So that's a pretty big change that actually played quite a big role also in how we looked at the Lucene 10 release. Up until now, I covered only Lucene minors. What about majors? They are bigger, more changes. And when it comes to Elasticsearch, upgrading to a new Lucene major means a new Elasticsearch major, which actually is bigger than that. It means a major release for the entire platform, and Cavanna, and all of that. So it takes time. It's a heavyweight process. But if we look at serverless, we can do it different. And we sat down and decided to decouple the two and just let's get Lucene 10 out as soon as possible without all of the rest. Kind of, let's pull a major without a major. We get out Lucene, and the rest, we leave it alone. With that covered, we can now dive deeper into Lucene 10, seen from our eyes, how it developed. And we go back in time quite a bit. We go back to how it all started in March last year. Adrien sent an email to the dev list and said, hey, it's been a while since we released the last major. I think it's time to get started on that. He proposed some tentative dates, setting the release as maybe October. Now, it's open source, deadlines are not binding. If we don't make it, we don't make it. But it's also very good to have some goal to work towards. And that's what we did. He also identified some of the things that we actually wanted to get in Lucene before the release started. Why? Because a major doesn't come every month. It doesn't even come every year. So there are things, breaking changes, significant API changes or features that is good to get into the next major. Otherwise, you need to wait for the following one. And this is a list of the 3 things that we sat down to work. We had yet to start working on this when we decided on the release. So what we did was heads down, work, heavy committing. And a few months later, we came back from the holidays at the end of August, and we checked, how are we? We were actually pretty good, surprisingly. Many of the things that we wanted to get done were done. Some were just not yet merged, but nearing completion. And then we looked inside at Elasticsearch. Are we ready? We actually need to start working on it ahead of time. So we actually want to start integrating Lucene 10 before it's released. Why? Because we want to be ready to get it out in serverless as soon as it comes out. So we want to do some preparation. And that's what we focused on. Then we decided, OK, how do we proceed? A major doesn't come every month. How do we do it? I mean, we have some clear procedure about how to upgrade Lucene from the feature branch situation that I described earlier. So we just do the same, just on a different branch. We can upgrade to Lucene 10. And then the usual things that engineers do, make it compile, right? So hammer it until it compiles. Then run tests. Is it green? No? Then make it green. And next, look at the performance, look at the regressions. What about that? You can tell here that we were a little optimistic. I think that we all knew that there was going to be a lot of work involved, but we got this feeling that we couldn't exactly point a finger to, OK, this specific thing is going to cost us a lot of time, because there weren't a lot of breaking changes or problematic things. Yet, in reality, what happened is, OK, what can go wrong? We just try to compile it and it should work. We upgrade and we get 100 errors. And we thought, this is good. But actually, that was the upper bound of how many errors we could get in the output. And we don't even know how many errors we got at the time. It was probably thousands. It doesn't even matter. So then we had to take a step back and decide, how do we proceed here? We need to do it quickly. And we put a team of 4 or 5 people working on it. And we decided on some ground rules to favor velocity. We actually got that done in 3 days, if I remember correctly. And then next step, make it green. Now it compiles, tests. And again, we go back to the optimistic approach. Like, should be fine. We ran tests on the server module, only unit tests, so it's not all of the tests. And 80% of them were failing for many different reasons, right? It's difficult even to list them. So again, we took a step back, like we did with the compile, and we said, how do we proceed about this? We go step by step, module by module, first unit test and integration tests, and we try to categorize together the different failures into groups. There weren't thousands of groups of failures, maybe 10 or 15. And then we could parallelize the effort across the different team members. And we set up CI. That's a great idea, right? Yes, the only problem being that CI is going to be red for weeks. So it doesn't really help a lot, at least in the beginning. The only green thing actually in CI was the new build button on top of the page for many weeks. So, OK, we did some heavy committing, and 20 working days later, we got the first green. And it was about to happen already for a couple of days. I remember the Slack messages saying, guys, we are there, but we weren't. And then at some point, we were. Super good. What are the lessons learned from this process? That we knew there were adjustments to be made, but there was more. There's always more. And why? Well, this is maybe a lesson for all of the projects that need to upgrade to a Lucene major, but even more for Elasticsearch, because of how it integrates with Lucene at a very low level. It's not just about doing search, but it's about doing a lot of other things. Lucene is a library. It relies on it heavily for many different things. So the integration is quite delicate. We also encountered some challenges around branching. We were working on a branch, getting updates from main Lucene every day, getting updates from main Elasticsearch every day, and work was happening on all of the branches, and streams were crossing. We would fix something. The day after, they would break again. Some overhead, which is typical when you work with separate branches, where you have high activity on those. The good of this was this happened before we started the release process in Lucene, but it provided a lot of input to Lucene itself, because we uncovered some things that had happened in Lucene that could be adjusted. Let's say some breaking changes, some things that we could improve around the user experience when you go and upgrade Lucene. So we provided early feedback as we were trying to get tests to run in those 20 days. And this was the result. A lot of teamwork. Some of us got together, but also other Lucene committees got together. We started discussing on some of the pain points of upgrading to Lucene 10. And we smoothed some edges, let's say. And that was a very good experience. So from now on, I'm going to show some of the faces that were involved in the process at each and every step. Now, it's green. We're good. What do we do on the Lucene side? It's the end of September, so we've been working on it already for a month, and it's time to get it out. So that's how we started the release process. And like Adrien mentioned earlier, it's a matter of creating a release candidate, opening a vote thread, and all that. Now, in the matter of 2 hours, we get an email to the dev list where obviously there was an issue. And actually, tests were green and everything, but the Lucene benchmarks were hanging for some reason. We had to stop the release, and we actually found a real bug. And again, impressive work. 4 people got together and fixed the problem in 1 day. Then we moved on, RC2. Now, up until here, I actually didn't cover a lot the benchmarks. We did have some early results from our own benchmarks in Elasticsearch, but we had some challenges interpreting them. We had probably too much signal. We couldn't tell if some of the issues that we were seeing were from Lucene, from Elasticsearch. It required more analysis. As the release process advanced, we were able to pinpoint one specific issue that the Lucene benchmarks didn't cover. And then we reported it, and we sadly had to stop the release again and go and fix it. We identified the offending commit. We got together again with the Lucene community, and we got it fixed. Next step, another release candidate. At this point, I, being the release manager, I could spin up a release with my eyes closed. I was dreaming of releasing, like, will the vote be fine or not? No, because we got another problem. But this is a fun one. Actually, timing is very interesting here. A user reported an issue. It was their first issue. The open, if you look at their report, is fantastic. It's a page of like a lot of information about how you could reproduce it, which helps a lot, which shows also like the power of the Lucene community. And we got together and we fixed that again in a day. Okay, spin up another release, October 10th. Are we there yet? Maybe. Yes, we were. So at the first attempt, at the 4th attempt, we were able to get it out. And with this, let's take a step back. What are the takeaways from all this process? It's a bit lengthy, and obviously, like this is the most obvious one for all of the engineers. It's never that simple, right? There are always complications, a bit like we had with the screen at the beginning of the talk. Embrace these unknowns and delays. It's open source, but the nice thing is we'll get it fixed together. Also, like as much as it was draining to drive the release and do many release candidates, it was great to find issues before they got out to users. They were actually blocker issues. It's important to have a good definition of what a blocker is, otherwise you never release. But in this case, I think the team did a good job of identifying that. We had some challenges around identifying what is the cause of some performance regressions. We actually found that a lot of our charts in Elasticsearch had other issues that were not related to Lucene, so we had to fix it on our side. Lastly, but actually the most important one, you can see from each and every step the community involvement. You cannot state it enough, like how good it is. You see a bunch of people getting together, no matter the company they work for, bringing in their technical skills, their passion, fixing things, working towards a common goal. So that was fantastic, very good to see. Now, is it time to celebrate? Not yet. We still ship it to production, right? That's the next step. And And we said, it's easy, we have a branch. It's just a matter of merging it. Yes, you wish. In reality, timing is essential there because we have users using our things and we don't want them to notice that we have shipped things. Make it transparent. They are not aware of versions and releases. We have other things going into main that may clash. So we have to take care of not releasing Lucene 10 to production with a lot of other changes that were unrelated. Try to isolate and contain the release, be able to monitor it to make sure that everything is fine. So that required a bit of waiting and synchronizing with other teams. Also, there were some ongoing incidents that were clashing a bit with the process that caused some delays. And last but not least, once Lucene 10 hits production and data gets written to the indices, you can't go back. So should we find an issue then, we got to go and fix it at the Lucene side, do another release. We can't really go back. So that caused some tension. We knew it, but that's also going back to the lengthy release process, the quality. It's very important to get it out when it's ready so that you don't have to go into emergency mode as soon as you are in production. So with all that, we actually managed to ship it to production in 2 weeks, which is, I think, pretty good for the first time. Maybe for Lucene 11, we'll have to do it in 1 day or something. But I think it's, if you compare it to releasing a major of Elasticsearch, Elasticsearch 9.0 was released, I think, in May, so many months later. And in the case of Lucene 10, at the end of October, our users were already able to use Lucene 10. And that's mission accomplished. With that, do we have time for questions? Well,
I guess I would first of all give a huge round of applause. I think that was
thank you.
Amazing. And yes, questions? Oh, we have some. And just to let you know, we are already out of time, so I can take maybe one more question.
Thank you. I have actually more than one question, but maybe just one about the governance process. You talked about the fact that only 3 PMC members are enough to decide the release. How can you explain that Lucene did not end up with a fork between if you at Elastic want to decide the release and it doesn't suit the objectives of other users of Lucene's? How can that be that Lucene can still be a single project and not ended up with a fork? Since you at Elastic can decide on your own to make a release of Lucene when you want, basically.
That's a really good question. I think that we cannot decide anything actually on Lucene. We can make a suggestion, but we are also very careful about not aligning business goals with Lucene releases because it's an Apache project. And we work together, and when we work on Lucene, we wear Lucene hats, mostly. So what Adrien did was something that was for the best of Lucene. And then, yeah, I mean, we played a role when it comes to Elastic, meaning we have many Lucene committers contributing to it. And I think what I showed you was also like a testament to how we are able to contribute. And even integrating Elasticsearch meant that we could provide feedback. So it's not only about shipping it to our users, but also about contributing back and all of that. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to congratulate you on that because it's an achievement.
Thank you.
Maybe to explain, I mean, because there's a release doesn't mean you need to upgrade, right? So, like, one concern I could imagine is that somebody thinks we shouldn't put that release out because the quality is not high enough, but then they wouldn't be forced to upgrade to that release. Like, you can wait for the next one. Nothing prevents you from running like 2 releases 1 week apart from one another after you've got the time to fix the issues. But I think it's good to have a strong bias toward releasing things because otherwise you can end up in a situation when the quality is never good enough for anyone and the project never gets released. And if you don't have a release, you don't have users. If you don't have users, you don't have a successful project. So it's a good bias.
Okay, then one more question.
In front row.
Hi. Does anyone already propose to release Lucene 11?
I think it came up already.
Yes, I think it come up in the context of the JDK, because the JDK regularly comes with improvements, and like vectorization is something that Lucene is extremely looking forward to. So maybe there's going to be a discussion about it the day when the vectorization APIs get properly released in the JDK. They're currently released, but that's experimental, so we are using it at our own risk. But the day when they become official, there might be a discussion about it.
Thanks.
I think it's been mentioned one or twice in the mailing list.
I guess I had the similar question about vectorization as well as quantization, because I think that's where probably, I would say, like a lot of Lucene-based products and Lucene as well is kind of lacking. And this is something that I've also discovered recently, that we have many different kind of quantization, and that is definitely required to bring vector search based on Lucene to production, and
yes,
quite
so
vital as well.
For those not aware, Lucene supports vectorization, but it requires you to pass an argument on the command line to be enabled. I don't remember the name exactly, but it's documented. If you have questions about it, like grab me afterwards. I can find it for you. And Uwe is going to talk about it, I believe, in his session at noon in Front Salon, in 5 minutes in Front Salon.
Right, right. And that probably segues us into not missing Uwe's talk, wherever that's happening, but congratulate and also thank Adrien and Luca for amazing talk. Let's give them a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.